At 4 in the morning on April 1st, 2026, Anthropic accidentally published the entire source code of Claude code to the internet, and it was not an April Fool's joke. The company that built a $380 billion business on the idea of responsible AI development, the company whose CEO has been warning the world about the risks of moving too fast with artificial intelligence, the company that positions itself as the safety-first alternative to every other AI lab, shipped a 57-megabyte source map file inside a public NPM package containing over 500,000 lines of fully readable TypeScript code. Within minutes, a security researcher named Chao Fan Shah spotted it. Within hours, it had spread across every corner of the internet. By the time Anthropic's legal team woke up in San Francisco and started issuing DMCA takedowns, the code had already been mirrored, cloned, forked, and rewritten by hundreds of developers around the world. This is the story of what happened, what was actually inside that code, and what it reveals about the technology that Anthropic has been keeping behind closed doors. The technical explanation for how this happened starts with the build tool. Claude code is built on Bun.js, the JavaScript runtime that Anthropic acquired approximately 3 weeks before this incident. Source map files are development tools. They exist to let developers trace compiled code back to the original readable source during debugging. Every major build tool in existence is configured to strip source maps out automatically before anything goes to production. That is not an advanced configuration. It is the default behavior. Somewhere in the process of building and publishing version 2.1.88 of the Claude Code NPM package, that default behavior did not apply. 3 weeks before the leak, a developer had opened an issue on the Bun.js GitHub repository specifically about Bun serving source maps in production environments. Whether that issue was the root cause of this specific incident is unclear and may never be definitively confirmed. What is notable is the timing. 3 weeks between a known production source map issue being reported on the runtime Anthropic had just acquired and a source map ending up in a production NPM release is a gap that developers and security researchers will be analyzing for a long time. The relationship between the two events may be causal, coincidental, or the result of an entirely separate configuration error made by a developer who was simply unaware of the Bun.js issue. Anthropic has not publicly confirmed the root cause. It is also possible that a developer made a configuration error. It is possible that someone did it intentionally. What is certain is that the result was identical, regardless of the specific cause. 500,000 lines of the most closely guarded proprietary AI code in the world became publicly accessible to anyone who knew where to look, and within minutes, people were looking. The open source community moved faster than Anthropic's lawyers. One developer used OpenAI Codex to rewrite Claude Code's leaked TypeScript into Python and published the result as a project called Claude. It became the fastest repository in history to surpass 50,000 GitHub stars. Another developer forked the leaked code and rebuilt it to work with any AI model, publishing it under the name OpenClaw. Both projects were live, accumulating stars, and attracting contributors before Anthropic had issued a single takedown notice. The speed at which the developer community absorbed, transformed, and republished the leaked code illustrated something important about how information moves in 2026. Legal mechanisms designed for a slower world, where content could be removed before it spread widely, are functionally ineffective against a community of thousands of technically sophisticated developers all working simultaneously. The DMCA process, which is designed for removing individual pieces of content from individual platforms, had no realistic mechanism to contain code that was being simultaneously mirrored across dozens of repositories, shared in private messages, downloaded to personal machines, and integrated into new projects in real time. Anthropic's legal team issued the takedowns anyway. The GitHub pull request someone submitted attempting to merge the leaked code back into Claude Code's official repository was deleted quickly. But the fundamental reality of what had happened could not be undone by any legal action. The code existed in too many places simultaneously, and the information it contained was already being read, analyzed, and acted upon by thousands of developers. What did the code actually reveal? The first and most significant finding was architectural. Claude Code is not a single unified AI system with some proprietary magical capability that Anthropic invented from scratch. It is a dynamic prompt pipeline built in TypeScript with 11 distinct steps between receiving your input and producing an output. That 11-step process was already being diagrammed and published in detailed breakdowns within hours of the leak. The core of the system is what researchers are calling a prompt sandwich, a layered structure of system instructions, context, tool definitions, and user input that gets assembled dynamically before being sent to the base language model. Each of the 11 steps in the pipeline handles a specific transformation of that input, adding context, applying safety filters, inserting tool definitions, formatting the final prompt structure and processing the model's response before it reaches the user. The full pipeline documentation that the community produced within hours of the leak is now more detailed than anything Anthropic had published officially. This is not surprising to AI researchers who have been building similar systems, but it does demystify the product for the broader developer community that had been treating Claude Code as something fundamentally more sophisticated than what it turned out to be under the hood. The code contains file after file of hard-coded instruction strings, hundreds of carefully written prompts telling the model how to behave, what to avoid, how to format responses, and how to handle edge cases. These are not algorithms. They are instructions written in plain English embedded directly in the codebase. The comments in the code are notably more detailed and more numerous than in a typical human-written codebase, which led many observers to conclude that these comments were written for the AI to read rather than for human developers, creating a system where AI is effectively being used to guide AI in a continuous loop. The broader implications of this incident extend well beyond the technical details of what was in the code. For Anthropic specifically, the timing is damaging. The company is reportedly planning an IPO later in 2026, and the value of that offering depends significantly on investors believing that Claude Code represents a durable competitive advantage protected by proprietary technology. A source code leak that transforms a black box into a publicly available blueprint changes that calculation in ways that are difficult to fully assess before the offering. For the wider AI industry, the leak reinforces a point that open source advocates have been making for years. The gap between closed source AI products and what can be built with open source components and good prompt engineering is much smaller than the closed source companies would prefer the market to believe. The technical architecture revealed in Claude Code's leaked source is sophisticated and well engineered, but it is not alien technology. It is TypeScript, prompt strings, regular expressions, and tool definitions assembled by skilled engineers. The magic was always more in the execution than in the underlying approach. For developers, the most immediate takeaway is practical. The 11-step pipeline is now documented. The tool list is now public. The prompt structures are now readable. The feature roadmap is now partially known. Whether or not the repositories hosting the code survive further DMCA actions, the information itself is distributed across thousands of minds and machines, and that distribution is permanent. Anthropic's most valuable trade secret spent approximately 6 hours as an open source project, and that is a window that cannot be closed retroactively regardless of what legal action follows. The lesson for every company shipping production software through NPM is simple, brutal, and apparently needed repeating in 2026, as much as it needed repeating in 2016. Check your build configuration before you publish. Audit every single file that is included in every package before it goes live on a public registry. Know exactly what your build tool is packaging. Source maps are development tools. They contain the readable source code of your entire project. They have no place in a production release. For Anthropic specifically, the incident will serve as a permanent reference point in the ongoing conversation about AI transparency, proprietary technology, and the gap between how AI companies present their products and what those products actually are under the surface. The code that was supposed to stay secret for years is now part of the public record. The features that were supposed to be announced on Anthropic's own terms are now known, and the architectural approach that was supposed to represent an insurmountable competitive moat is now a starting point for anyone who wants to build something similar. None of that can be undone. The only productive response available to Anthropic now is to move faster, build better, and perhaps seriously reconsider whether the closed source approach was ever as strategically advantageous as it seemed when a single misconfigured build tool can undo years of carefully maintained secrecy in under 6 hours.